What's good, YouTube, and welcome back to Raise the Flags Football. It's been a while since I have posted a video. I apologize for that. I've been away for too long. Sorry I didn't finish out last year. Had a little bit going on in the spring. A lot of sports, stuff like that. I am in the middle of a high school wrestling season, so I'm going to have to be working around that for the next few months, but after that I should be good for the whole summer. I have plenty of time to do this, so I will be back full-time for the whole 2026 indoor football season. And without further ado, let's get into our first episode back on Raise the Flags Football Talk. Today we're going to be talking about the Arena Football 1. Last year I did make a preview video for this league where I went over the entire history of the AFL, because the AF1 is pretty much a sort of like spiritual successor of the Arena Football League. So if you want the full AFL history, go back and watch that. But for today, we are just going to be talking about the Arena Football League that started back up in 2024, because that's really the only league or version of the league that directly leads to the AF1, to the creation of the league, and really has some of the same teams. So before we do that, if you've been watching YouTube for more than maybe a day, then you know that I want you to subscribe, so I'm not going to be shoving that down your throat the whole video. Just please do it. And without further ado, let's get into the history of the Arena Football 1. If I can pull it up here. So in 2024, the Arena Football League finally returned after 4 seasons of inactivity from 2020 to 2023. And the league had set a very high bar for themselves. Originally planning to have 20 teams, the league would have to cut down to 16, with 4 teams in 4 divisions. And they had a mix of former AFL teams, former champions indoor football teams after the 2 leagues merged, and brand new expansion teams. However, this plan was largely unsuccessful. It was a huge failure. Half the league folded during the regular season. They had to rush to schedule games. They had to pretty much start a new season halfway through. They had to count forfeits so that some teams had enough games on their record for it to even be considered a legit season. And going into the playoffs, there were only 8 teams in the league. They ended up sending 6 out of these 8 teams to the playoffs. And Arena Bowl 33, which was the final game of the season, and up to this point has been the most recent, and unfortunately probably will be the final Arena Bowl, which was played in a mall in New Jersey, was between the Billings Outlaws and the Albany Firebirds, which Billings won. After this, the remaining 8 teams in the AFL jumped ship to create Arena Football 1, and only 6 of those teams would make it to join the Corpus Christi Tritons and Oregon Lightning in the league's inaugural season. This season saw a lot less drama once the year started. Of course, there was the legal battle with the Orlando Predators. You had teams like the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Mavericks and the Arizona Bandits and a few others that were scheduled to join the league, but ended up having to drop out and not play the season. And then, of course, the championship game, the Arena Crown, as it would become known, was played between the unbeaten Albany Firebirds and their bitter rivals, the Nashville Cats. This rivalry has really heated up since the 2024 relaunch of the AFL, when the teams played each other several times that year. And they played each other several times last year, including in the finals. They're in the same division. They're, by AF1 standards, not too far from each other. And I would say it's maybe the best rivalry in the AF1 right now. The Firebirds won the game. They finished their unbeaten season If I'm not mistaken, they might have been the only unbeaten team in arena football last year. The Renegades might have, but I'm pretty sure they were the only one. And after the season, the Salina Liberty and Southwest Kansas Storm, the other two teams that had played in the AF1 playoffs in 2025, announced that they would be jumping ship to the National Arena League. They wanted to face more regional opponents and not have to travel as far, not have to spend as much on travel costs, because the whole sport and industry of arena football isn't anywhere near as big money and marketable and stuff like that as the NFL or even the CFL is. And so these regional opponents and this regionality really matters a lot for a lot of those smaller teams in arena football. And so they wanted to go back to playing their old rivals from the CIF and go back to not having to travel as far. The Billings Outlaws, who had changed their name to the Outlaws Football, which was really the first red flag that things weren't going great in Billings. They announced they would not play in 2026. They are planning to return in 2027. That's really what they all say, so we don't know if that's going to happen or not. Corpus Christi Tritons, they got kicked out of the league for pretty much the same reason that the Orlando Predators did. I'll get into that a little bit later. If you know, you know. So heading into 2026, with all of these teams leaving, the AF1 had 4 teams, with the Firebirds, Cats, and Washington Wolfpack from the AFL and the Oregon Lightning, who were an expansion team into the league. This didn't really set them back, though, as during the offseason they also made several key additions, including the National Arena League champion Beaumont Renegades and the Arena League champion Duluth Harbor Monsters, which are 2 amazing adds to the AF1. The Harbor Monsters, of course, changed their name to the Minnesota Monsters. I personally like the Duluth Harbor Monsters name better, but that was probably tied to the Arena League, and they probably, for legal reasons, couldn't use that in the AF1. They also added a few expansion teams. The Michigan Arsenal, the Oceanside Bombers, and the Kentucky Barrels will all be joining the league for the 2026 season, giving the league 9 teams and 3 defending champions. I live in Michigan, so I'm probably going to visit a few Arsenal games this year, and if you live near any of these teams, which I will list them all later on in this video, you should definitely go to a game, try to check it out, and just see what you think of this variant of football. Because in my opinion, indoor football is much more entertaining than outdoor football. There's a lot more big plays, more big hits, more scoring, and just more action. And these players are playing for the passion of the game and not the money that comes with it, which just makes the product so much better, even if these aren't the best players in the world. Anyway, back to the AF1. Heading into the season, the league has 3 main contenders for the Raise the Flags national title, which I will get into later on in the video. Those teams are the Albany Firebirds, Beaumont Renegades, and Nashville Cats, while the Minnesota Monsters and the Oregon Lightning round out a strong field of ranked 2026 teams, and the Wolfpack look to rebound from disappointing 2024 and 2025 campaigns in the AFL and AF1 respectively, where they had pretty abysmal records both of those years. But you never know, teams can always turn around. As we see in college football, Indiana was by far the worst team of all time for a while. And then Kurt Cignetti gets there, things change, things can change, and I think that they possibly could this year for the Wolfpack. And there are also 3 brand new teams in the AF1, the Arsenal, Bombers, and Barrels, and they are all looking to break the curse that the AF1 has had with their expansion teams, and with expansion with all of the teams that had never played a game before that they tried to add last year going out of business before even playing a game. and trying to assert themselves into title contention. I think the AF1 has the potential to become one of, if not the most fun league to watch this year, and I feel like they have a very good chance of sending a team to the national title and becoming the top league in arena football if they can stay in business, if they can find some sense of stability, which the IFL absolutely has. But I feel like with the Firebirds, with the Renegades, with the Cats, with the Monsters, with the Lightning, if they can get these teams to stick around, there will start to become that same sense of stability with the AF1. And I feel like this is going to be a very fun league and a very interesting league to keep an eye on in 2026. Without further ado, here are my predictions for the 2026 Arena Football 1 standings. In the East Division, you have, in first place, I have the Albany Firebirds. This is pretty much the most no-brainer decision that you can make when you're predicting standings. The Firebirds dominated the Arena Football League in 2024, started to fall off towards the end of the season, ended up losing the Arena Bowl. They did not let that happen last season, going undefeated, winning the first Arena crown, and beating their rivals in the championship game. And I feel like it's only up from there for the Firebirds now that I'm actually trying to figure out who the best team from any league is. Now there's a national championship to play for. I feel like the Firebirds have to be in any conversation about who is going to be the 2026 national champions. And then in second, I have the Nashville Cats. This one's also pretty much a no-brainer. They, of course, made the Arena crown last year. I feel like in any other division, I would have them in first. This East Division is stacked with the Firebirds and the Cats, and I do see potential in having two East Division teams playing each other for the title again this year. And I think the Firebirds and the Cats are going to have a very competitive rivalry this season. More on that later. And then in third, I have the Kentucky Barrels. I mean, they're pretty much being thrown to the wolves this year. They have to play arguably the two best teams in the league, two national title contenders as their division opponents, and they have never played a game before, so I feel like if the Kentucky Barrels can put together a successful year this year, make the playoffs, be a contender, beat the Firebirds, beat the Cats, and they also have to play the Renegades twice, I'm pretty sure. So that will be huge for the Barrels if they can pull off a good season this year. Overall, I think that this is maybe the best division grouping in the league by far, maybe in arena football. The IFL has some pretty big divisions, which means that they're going to have some good teams and some not so good teams in each of those divisions. But this division is going to be really fun to watch, as is the AF1 Central Division. In first, I have the Beaumont Renegades. Amazing first season last year. In their first ever season, they dominated the National Arena League in 2025, winning the league's championship and proving themselves as contenders in the arena football world. This year, of course, they're changing things up a little bit. After 1 year in the NAL and one title, they decided to, instead of just sticking in the National Arena League and becoming a dynasty there, continue to move up in competition and continue to challenge themselves by moving to Arena Football 1. And I feel like we're going to see a similar level of dominance from the Renegades. I can't wait to watch the Renegades and Firebirds play each other. Renegades Cats has potential to become a good rivalry, and I feel like they're going to be a very fun team to watch in 2026. And the other new expansion team that won a championship in a different league last year are the Minnesota Monsters. Of of course formerly known as the Duluth Harbor Monsters, and they pretty much have the same story as the Renegades. They've won both championships in the Arena League since its inception in 2024, and both times they were undisputedly the best team, first seed heading into the playoffs, by far the best record, and then very dominant in the playoffs. And I feel like the Monsters, they were basically like a diamond in the rough with the Arena League. A lot of people are saying that the Arena League might be as competitive as the National Arena League and maybe even the AF1. I really don't think so. Just watching their games versus an AF1 game, I think the AF1 is a lot more competitive, and I think that's really the only reason to not have the expectations be through the roof for the Monsters. This is a new domain for them. This is a lot tougher competition than what they've seen previously. The Renegades, the NAL may be a small step down, but it's not very far off from the AF1, and especially this year, it's going to be a very competitive league as well. Of course, we'll be talking more about that next week right here on Raise the Flags Football Talk. But I think that the Monsters are going to find that it's a lot harder to compete in the AF1 than it is to compete in the Arena League. However, I also think that they're going to find some degree of success in the league and maybe even compete with the Renegades for a Central Division title. In third in the Central Division, I have the Michigan Arsenal. Again, it's really just the story of an expansion team being thrown to the wolves, two former dominant league champions just a year ago. I do find it funny that 0 of the teams in this division were even in the league last year. But I just think that, and I hate to say it because I'm probably going to be rooting for the Arsenal this year. Again, like I said last year, I'm going to be very unbiased. I'm not going to put the Arsenal higher in my rankings just because I feel like I like them. Same thing with the Orlando Pirates and the Jacksonville Sharks of the IFL, teams that I will be rooting for this year. If anything, it's going to be more of a taking a point off because I know them kind of thing. But I just feel like, unfortunately, the Arsenal, as a brand new team, don't yet have the tools to compete with the Renegades and the Monsters, the same way that I feel about the Barrels against the Cats and the Firebirds. And both of these divisions that I just talked about are stacked, and there's even the chance that the Barrels or the Arsenal could surprise me and turn into a really good team as well. However, I can't really say the same about the AF1 West division, as I would say they maybe have the 5th best team in the league as their best team. And first I have the Oregon Lightning. The Lightning were a solid team last year. They were not exactly AF1 contenders, but they also weren't bottom of the barrel, one of the worst teams in the league. And they do have experience on their side. So I feel like they're maybe not going to be super competitive in games against teams like the Firebirds, like the Cats, like the Renegades, like the Monsters. But I feel like they will be able to beat up on the Barrels. I feel like they'll be able to beat up on the Arsenal, and playing the Wolfpack 4 times, and then playing the Bombers as well. That's going to be, I feel like the Lightning definitely have a schedule that could easily lead to an 8, 9, maybe even 10 win season. Of course, the AF1 will be playing 12 games across 15 weeks for each team. Some of that scheduling gets a little weird, you have the Arsenal playing 4 home games in a row from the end of April towards mid-May. And then they have no home games for over a month, a 5-week stretch, I think it is, from mid-June until they finally host the Bombers in the final week of the regular season at the end of July. but I feel like the Lightning should have no problem breezing through this division. And second, I have the Washington Wolfpack. The Wolfpack do have 2 seasons of experience. However, these were 2 very abysmal seasons, very unsuccessful. And I feel like they need to start turning things around, or they're going to start to become, no offense to New Yorkers, but the New York Jets of arena football. Just the team that's kind of there, but doesn't really compete. But I feel like they do have the ability with the Barrels, Arsenal, and Bombers all being brand new. And again, that means we don't really know anything about those 3 teams, so who knows? They could be like the 3 top teams in the league. I just don't see it. And I feel like this could be the turnaround year for the Wolfpack. But if it's not, then they do need to take some serious looks at what they're doing. And third, I have the Oceanside Bombers. Just like they're an expansion team. Normally, expansion teams aren't competitive right off the jump. We do have some anomalies to that. Of course, the Beaumont Renegades being right there. But I feel like the Bombers are going to face some struggles, especially off the field. They're playing in the exact same stadium as an IFL team in the San Diego Strike Force, and not a bad IFL team either. And I feel like in San Diego and in Oceanside, whatever city they're in, I feel like they are going to be playing second fiddle to the Strike Force for most of the season. Will that deter good players from wanting to come play there? Will that make them any less successful on the field with what I'm assuming is going to be one of the lower atmospheres in the league this year? Only time will tell. Who knows? They could surprise me and become one of the most competitive teams in this league. Of course, they're not playing a division of killers, so I feel like they could win the West Division, and I feel like the West Division is anyone's game because there isn't really any true title contender in there. Pretty sure I have Oregon ranked maybe in the 20s, and then the Wolfpack and Bombers are both unranked, obviously. But moving on from standings to big matchups from the Arena Football 1 in 2026. Of course, the main one, the major marquee game, is the Renegades and the Firebirds. They play each other twice this year, in the second week of the AF1 season and then sometime during mid-season. Renegades, I have them ranked 5th. They're a huge contender, maybe going to be the ones to finally beat the Firebirds. And then, of course, the Firebirds are the dynasty of the league, went unbeaten last year. Haven't lost a game since the most recent Arena Bowl, which feels like it was forever ago. And the Firebirds are going to be the team to beat, but I feel like the Renegades maybe are the team that can beat them. I also have a few other Firebird matchups on here, one of them being the Arsenal and the Firebirds. The only reason I really have that on here is probably because I'm going to probably be going to that game, and that's probably going to be the game that's going to determine whether they can compete in the AF1 or not, and really test themselves against the team to beat in the AF1. I have the Firebirds and the Monsters on here. Again, 2 former league champions. And this is really going to either prove me right or prove me wrong in saying that the Arena League is a few levels down from the AF1 and that is going to plague the Monsters this year when they are playing way tougher opponents. Or maybe it won't. Maybe the Monsters will surprise me. They'll win this game. They'll break the Firebirds. I believe it's like 13-ish game winning streak. I don't know. It's definitely the longest winning streak in arena football right now. But the other Firebirds matchup I have on here is the Cats. This is the game of the regular season that the Firebirds want to win, that they absolutely have to show up for and show out, because the Cats and the Firebirds is maybe the best rivalry in the AF1 and maybe even in arena football right now. And feel like if the Firebirds can't beat the Cats in the regular season, then they don't really deserve to be called the best team in the league. And I feel like the Cats this year, I feel like they could overtake the Firebirds, but these are must-win games for Nashville, more than when they're playing Beaumont or playing anybody else. They have to beat the Firebirds, and if they do that, I feel like they can reasonably jump up into that number one spot in the AF1. But if they can't, I feel like a couple losses to the Firebirds, along with a couple other league losses, knocks them out of world or national title contention. I don't know why I said world. But yeah, I can't wait to watch these rivalry games between the Cats and the Firebirds. And I feel like with the added juice of them being rematches from the Arena Crown, it's just going to make it so much bigger. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for a while. I believe week 12 of the AF1 season, which would be week 18 overall of the arena football season, is the first time that they play each other out of 2 this year. I feel like if the Wolfpack and Lightning are playing each other 4 times, we could have at least gotten this matchup 3 times. But whatever. And so we will see who can establish their dominance over the East Division. A couple other games I have on here. I have the Wolfpack Lightning rivalry. It's arguably the second best rivalry in the league. Really also the other only main rivalry in the league. Wolfpack, Lightning, Cats, and Firebirds were the only 4 teams to make it out of last season and return for this year. And I feel like that is for a reason, and that because of that, they do have this established history that none of the other teams have playing each other, and that creates the rivalries that we see coming into this year. Of course, there will likely be other rivalries created this year, which these next couple games that I listed have the potential for, that being the Cats and the Renegades. I feel like there's a very good chance that if the Firebirds do fall this year, we see this game in the Arena Crown. If the Firebirds do remain dominant, we maybe see this game in the semifinals. I feel like both of these teams are going to be in the postseason and are going to be in title contention the whole season. And the Cats and the Renegades, while maybe not being as big of a matchup as either team playing the Firebirds, is still going to be a huge game that is likely going to determine who gets a home game and who is on the road in the first round of the AF1 playoffs. Because if they're doing what they did last year, it's just going to be semifinals and then Arena Crown. And then I also have the Cats and the Monsters. I feel like this is pretty much a battle for who doesn't have to play the Firebirds in the first round of the playoffs. These are 2 very solid teams, 2 teams that are definitely going to be title contenders this year, but that I don't see really winning the title this year unless one of them can somehow upset the Firebirds. But this is still a big game. This is still going to be a fun game to watch, and this is definitely one that I have circled on the calendar, and you should too. Now, before I go, I just want to talk a little bit about the overall system between all of the leagues that I have. I always like to keep a top 25 rankings similar to the way college does it, because the landscape of arena football is in a way similar to the landscape of college, in a sense that there's several leagues, just like college has several conferences. But in arena football, there isn't really one way to determine what the best team is between all of those leagues. And so I will, at the end of the season, after all of the games are said and done, I will crown a Raise the Flags football national champion, and that will be the number 1 ranked team. Of course, the IFL, the AF1, the NAL are like the main leagues and are probably going to be favored a little bit in the rankings, whereas AIF teams, AAL teams, TAL teams gonna have to work a little bit to get up in here. I'm always gonna try to keep 3 league champions in the world title race that I will be posting on the website, which I will leave a link to in the description. And also, I will try to post them onto YouTube if I can. I don't know if it'll let me. I've been struggling with that, but that is going to be fun to watch as it develops. The title race is really where I just keep like the top 8 teams that have the best chance of being national title contenders, and I put them on a list. But with that being said, thank you for watching the return of Raise the Flags football. I cannot wait for this season and to watch this season play out. A lot of really competitive leagues, and the AF1 is right up there. With that being said, I will be posting another video, Raise the Flags in the Arena, on Thursday. I believe I'm going to be talking about the American Arena League. I'm not sure on that. Watch to find out. And then next week we will be talking about...
Just when you thought we'd done it all
That was weird. We will be talking about the National Arena League. But thank you for watching, and remember to raise the flags. Goodbye.